This man is my paternal grandfather. His name was Earl Dwayne Craven Sr., and he was a fireman in the McKeesport Fire Company in western Pennsylvania near Pittsburgh. He was born in 1900, died in 1995. He served. He wanted to serve, and he did serve very well. He was promoted once to be chief, but he didn't want to be chief. He wanted to stay being a captain so he could serve the people and help fighting the fires. The reason I show him to you today is the theme today is all about service. The theme today is about how it is an honor to serve. It's an honor to serve. It's also Scout Sunday. It's the fifth Sunday after Epiphany and Scout Sunday. The text, 1 Corinthians 15, 1-11, for I handed on to you as of first importance what I had first received. In Luke 5, 1-11, Jesus fills the nets of the disciples with fish and then tells them they're to go follow him and catch people from now on. Exactly what did the disciples have to gain by following Jesus? I mean, certainly in this reading, he produces a harvest of fish for them, and that's really good, so that makes a lot of sense that they would follow him. But I mean, what exactly did they have to gain by catching people? Do you think they even knew what he meant? Or did they even care? You know, they were young, they were older teenagers, and they had already been sent back to their fathers to learn the trade of their fathers because they weren't smart enough to follow the rabbi. If they were going to follow a rabbi, they'd still be in school. And so when this rabbi told them to follow them, it was an honor. So that's one of the reasons they left. They were amazed and honored to serve. And sometimes we forget to be honored to serve. Sometimes we think of service as something that is not to our advantage. We forget, and people are so self-centered today, that what people call freedom is something that is actually inhibiting them because they don't trust authority, it seems, anymore. People don't trust God. People don't trust the government. People don't trust the police. And so they serve only themselves. And by doing so, they're not really serving themselves. They're doing themselves a disservice. But by serving something that's bigger than you are benefited. And that is the call to service, and that's the honor of service. And sometimes we forget about the honor of service. I think it's a problem today. It's important for us Christians to understand our roles as servants of the Lord. Jesus himself described himself as a servant of God the Father. In Paul's letter to the Corinthians, he says, I handed on to you as of first importance what I in turn had received. The disciples and Paul were servants of God. They were not thinking about themselves, but working for a higher purpose. In fact, the Apostle Paul described himself as a slave to Christ. In the Greek word, the New Testament was written in Greek, and the word for servant is also sometimes translated as the word doulos, which means slave. Paul actually referred to himself as a slave of Christ. You know, I'm not wearing the collar now, but that's why the pastors, clergy wear this clerical collar. It's to remind them of the collar of obedience, that they are to be obedient to God and to serve God in that way. Did you know that? It's true. Freedom in the Bible is not freedom from authority to serve ourselves, but rather freedom in the Bible is freedom to serve God, the authority, and God's children. A lot of people get this mixed up today, and they feel that their freedom is all about themselves. True freedom, spiritual freedom, Christian freedom, and I dare say American freedom is about the freedom to serve, not to be served. This is one reason why I like the Scouts. I mean, in a world of me first, the Scouts still today are trained to be productive citizens and decent, God-fearing people who help others and work for the common good and not their own advancement. I've never seen a person get awarded an Eagle Scout badge for investing in the Fortune 500 and making the most money of anybody in the country and being at the top of the Fortune 500, but I have seen many received an Eagle Scout award badge because they worked with their own sweat and tears and did something good in service to somebody else. Serving, particularly serving God, is not a burden, it's an honor. Serving God and community make us a part of something greater we could ever be by ourselves. There's different ways to be called into service. Just like military service, some volunteer. Some of us are old enough to remember that in the old days they would voluntold you, is what I heard. You got drafted and they told you were going to serve whether you want to or not. Sometimes we rush to serve, and other times we're kind of ooched along and pushed by good people, mentors, friends, teachers, whoever it is, and sometimes not so gently pushing us from behind. And if and when that happens to you, don't complain. Don't grumble. Count yourself as blessed. Don't grumble if a friend or mentor has some tough love for you. Many people allowed to serve only themselves when they were younger later regretted in life and wished that somebody had been more strict with them along the way, guiding, molding, teaching a person to be good, focused not just on themselves. There's a famous poem called Footprints. It's often read at funerals, where a man is talking about his life and he looks back on the scenes of his life on the beach, and there's always two sets of footprints, and he noticed that one couple points where there's most toughest place in his life, these two footprints was God walking with him. You see, God promised to be with him, and then he noticed in some tough spots in his life there was only one set of footprints. So he got all upset. And he said to God, he said, "Why? What is the deal? My toughest places in my life, I know there's only one set of footprints. How come you abandoned me?" And God says, "No, my precious child, I didn't abandon you. When you saw only one set of footprints, it was there that I carried you." And that's how that story goes. But I saw a meme on a computer the other day, which was kind of funny. Added another scenario. It says, and where you see that long groove cut low and deep and hard into the sand along the way, that's when I dragged you kicking and screaming into the future, into your destiny to serve even when you didn't want to go. So there's different ways to be called to service. Some people know, say, "Oh, I love this, I'm going to do this." And other people, they might come in the back door. The prophet Isaiah was called with a burning coal on his lips. And the prophet Ezekiel was called by eating the sweet words of God in the scroll, which tasted to him like honey. And Martin Luther was called on the road. He was walking down the road and he was scared by a lightning storm. A lightning bolt came down and he said, "Oh, St. Anne, I'll become a monk." That's how he was called into service. But but these big lightning bolt moments aren't usually the way people are called. In fact, I think that it's mostly not that way. Usually the way that we're called, it is the mentors, it is the teachers, it is the parents, it is the grandparents, it is the friends, the scout leaders, the Sunday school teachers, the friend who teaches us about Jesus, teaches us how to pray, teaches us to have faith. Sometimes we doubt, but that's okay. We're lifted up by those who taught us. Then we become people who lift others up. Faith is not a thing to be measured, but rather is a relationship. And just like in all relationships, it has its ups and it has its downs. Paul himself says, "I am the least of the apostles, but by the grace of God, I am what I am." Here's a guy who wrote most of the New Testament, and he says he's the least. So it is with us in relationship to God and God's holy church. God's people, we learn and then pass to others. The scout who's reading the reading today in church on Scout Sunday is Hayden Leonard. He just recently was elected to a member of the church council. It is now his turn, as this graybeard will ride soon, one of these days, into the sunset. It is truly the greatest honor that can be bestowed upon anybody, is to serve God, others, and community. Often when we're young or old or somewhere in between, we feel we're not ready for service. We're not smart enough. We're not strong enough. We don't know exactly what to do. When Moses was called, he didn't know what to say. God said, "Don't worry, I'll tell you what to say. I'll send Aaron with you." We feel inept. We feel afraid of many things. We're not clear about stuff. And as we reflect on the honor of service, I want to close with a story I've told both at confirmation camp and also at the pulpit at Mellinger's, but I want to share it again with you today. There's a great saying that God does not always call the qualified, but God qualifies the called. One time when I was a kid, I was hanging out at the schoolyard and I was called to service. It was an honor for me to serve on a baseball team that was older than my league. I played in the tiny league, and these kids were having a game. They didn't have enough players, and they were in the older league. It had uniforms and all that stuff. And they called me into service because they didn't have enough players. So I was honored to go and be called into service as their right fielder that day. Now, they put me there because they hoped nobody would hit the ball there. And so even though I didn't feel fit, I was called. and it was an honor. So I went and I served. And I think that's what I'm trying to get at, is what I want you to do. If you don't feel you're fit, if you're called, go and serve anyway. God will guide you. It doesn't always work out exactly the way we want, but here's what happened to me. Our team was losing by 1 run in the bottom of the last inning. We had runners on second and third, and there were 2 outs, and it was my turn to bat. I had struck out 3 previous times without once so much as even touching the ball. And I could tell, I could hear the groan from the stands. I could hear the groan from my own players as I kind of wandered up to the plate with dragging the bat in the dust. But I was honored to serve, and so I served. And I went up to the plate, and before I could blink an eye, there was 2 strikes on me. And I was determined that the next pitch I was going to swing. And I was so scared, and my knees were knocking so much I couldn't even look. So I closed my eyes, I stuck the bat out, and I got a single in the left field, 2 runs scored, and we won the game. The point is, if you are called, go. God will uplift you. God will guide you. God will help you. It is an honor to serve. And if and when you are called, don't say no, because it's much better than serving yourself. It just works out a lot better in the long run. Mr. Rogers used to say, always look for the helpers. May you be one of those helpers. It's an honor to serve. God bless the Scouts. God bless the Christian community. And God bless you. Amen.